all set. We can actually move in the middle of this if you really want to here, but thanks to all three of you here. Basically, three people from very different industries, but to a certain extent, doing very similar things, and obviously the way you're incorporating AI and other technology into your businesses. And I want to first start with the consumer-facing side of it all. And Carol, since you're sitting closest to me, we'll start with JetBlue, which I think most people in this room are familiar with the origin story. And obviously, it was an airline that really sort of started from day one with this idea of in-flight entertainment and other technological tools in the cabin for the consumer to make the experience a little bit different. How has that evolved over the last 26 years? I mean, what are you doing right now?
Yeah, so thanks. It's great to be with you all today. And yeah, innovation is in our DNA. We were the first airline to offer seat-back entertainment. We were the first airline to offer free onboard Wi-Fi, and that has continued to be a big part of how we show up for our customers. Look, I think the things that have evolved over the last 25 years have been really around customers are much more mobile first. They are much more, and we have to meet them where they are. So a lot of customers today, they have no appetite for friction. I'm sure if you think about it and you think about how you shop and how you travel, each and every one of you probably just gets annoyed with all the different friction points that come in any of those experiences. So I think the place that we are most focused on using technology from a customer-facing standpoint is how do we remove as many friction points as possible throughout that journey, so that we have our legendary hospitality available for customers if they want or need it, but we don't require those friction points. So,
are there friction points in the beauty space?
Sure, there's lots of friction points. Mm-hmm. And I think, I have a view because I had just come from banking before I was now at Estée Lauder, and there's a lot of similarities because it's all around the consumer experience that you want to deliver. And, whether it's understanding online what I want to buy, what kind of product, what is the efficacy of it, how do I use it, what's the regimen that makes sense, what's good on my skin tone, and so all of the things. How do you bring the wealth of information in a simplified format to what consumers want in a very personalized way? So that's kind of the challenge.
Who's the more demanding customer, banking customer or the beauty customer?
Well, I think so. People in general are people, right? So I would just say.
Is that a compliment or criticism?
I think, no, it's not. It's just sort of the reality of how is it that you really are where the consumer needs to be, a bit like you were just saying. And how do you give that experience that it's like 1 or 2 clicks and I have what I want? And then most importantly, how do I kind of buy it and have it sent to me as quickly as possible? Or when I'm in a store, how do I understand what it is, where is what I'm looking for, and how do I kind of interpret how you would use it? I think it's a lot about education as well.
But with regards to the friction points of just even making a selection, and I just want to draw the distinction between an airline. I mean, anyone who's booked a flight, you spend a lot of time looking for the right price, the right seats, the time, everything else. But the same thing with beauty products. It's you're trying to find that best serum for your face, and you can spend an entire weekend just trying to figure out what's best or not. So how do you make that process easier, but more importantly, to make sure they actually buy something that's an Estée Lauder product?
Well, so, I think, again, being where the consumer is, and one example of what we had done, so buying fragrance is really difficult. So we created an AI scent advisor so that you can have a conversation with the large language model on what I like, what I think my friend or, whoever you're buying a gift, what they may like. And it kind of interprets that. It uses a taxonomy on your senses, on your olfactory senses, and the taxonomy that we use. And then it provides you with a choice. And we found that, our best sellers in stores or online are not the ones that people are choosing, because now all of a sudden it's just relating an experience, a memory, or something else. And then we kind of serve up, because we have all the data on exactly what the underlying scents are, to sort of satisfy a customer need. And we're seeing a 2x uptake once people engage with that scent advisor.
But even if they're not able to smell it in person.
Yeah, because the whole idea, so I don't want to maybe have to go to a store and kind of smell and so we do an amazing job with our beauty advisors in stores, but we want to be able to provide that experience online to make it as easy, simple, and frictionless as possible.
So Laksh, you don't have a scratch and sniff program.
The what, sorry?
Paramount. This is for Laksh.
No, nothing at Paramount like that.
Yeah.
But you never know, there may be a placement.
And just to be clear, so there's no friction between you and Carol. JetBlue does carry Paramount Plus and Peacock, right? Talk a little bit, Laksh, about your use of it. And I know for you, it's not just the consumer-facing side of this.
Yeah.
It's also about what you're doing internally in the company to make things more efficient.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone's kind of heard Paramount in the news in various different degrees. And just to take a step back with Paramount, we've gone through multiple mergers over the last 6 years. So I'm kind of in the middle of almost my third one now.
Yeah.
So one of the things
Is that the last one?
I hope so. I feel like I've definitely got an M&A background at this point. But, I think one of the things that we've noticed in comparatively the first time we did this merger was we were doing a traditional M&A. We were combining systems together. The first question I got during those days was how do I get email to be one email across the board? Over the last year, it's been a bit of a different story bringing Skydance in. It's been more, not necessarily about systems so much, but how do we make the experience, everything completely frictionless? So, we've been really looking at AI as being sort of a one-stop shop for folks. So imagine when you hear a lot of the folks talking about all these bots and they're building out things, but then when you're bringing a company together, we went with sort of an approach of having one bot coming in and answering your IT questions, your finance questions, your HR questions, and trying to make the experience for employees, I would call it frictionless. Because a lot of our employees have gone through a lot of change. They're trying to figure out, what systems are out there. And so our real push now is to make it as seamless as possible. We want an employee from the beginning of hire all the way to leaving the company to have just a basic, you should just be able to say, I want to buy a pencil, and I should just do it. I shouldn't have to know what my ERP systems are or what my, whatever related parties are. So that whole networking and agentic feature has been something we've been driving towards.
But as you're building out these products, whether it's the consumer-facing side or internally, there is this question of making sure everything is cohesive, right? You're not just bolting on
Correct.
AI on top of systems, or are you?
No. Actually, the biggest challenge we have is a kind of a balance between our relationship with our enterprise vendors out there. So everyone knows that every enterprise vendor has some form of AI at different degrees of education. But there's also, on the other hand, a lot of new tools out there that enable building things much faster. We're not, we're striving to be more of a media tech company, and so embracing that, the new AI tools that you can just start developing on the fly. It's actually a little bit of an art in that respect, is that 1 minute I built something and then all of a sudden my enterprise vendor built something slightly better, 2 months later. And so what we've built is sort of I call it an agentic framework, where it's not supposed to be legacy rigid. It's not supposed to be something that if I build this thing, I can never undo. When you go into an ERP system, I like using that as a good example, those take a long time to stand up. So the way we're building this is a framework that covers both InfoSec, it covers the ability for us when we bring on new solutions, either it's an enterprise or we build it, follows a set of standards that's easy for us to plug in. And that's the key. It's we should be able to take in and out different solutions, and it shouldn't be a full-on orchestration to do it. So I think I would say we're at the early phases of it, but part of what we're doing as a company is we're not just tying it as an IT or a finance thing. What we're finding is that each one of our business units, and we range from your rights, your productions, your advertisement, all of them are kind of coming with us with different use cases, and having that sort of framework that we could repeat for all of those solutions is actually the most important thing we're doing right now.
I would assume, Carol, for you being an airline, that you have a lot of complexity as well in making sure that things are cohesive across the board.
We do. We have incredible. We have an incredible amount of complexity, and there are so many things in our world that are outside our control. If you look back to the last 4 months, we've had 2 government shutdowns. We've had a Venezuelan airspace closure. We've had a blizzard, a snowstorm, and you name it. And so one of the ways that we try to also use technology for the benefit of our customers and our own internal crews is we've for example, leveraged machine learning to build a digital twin that is predictive of our operation, and particularly kind of takeoff and landing times throughout the day for 48 hours in advance. And the reason we have invested so heavily in that is it actually gives our operating teams a leg up and a heads up to be able to be more proactive and anticipatory when things like this happen. Look, when you have no one hates to cancel flights more than we do, and no one hates to delay flights more than we do. Customers don't like it, we don't like it, it's expensive, it's painful. But when you have a big blizzard, like, there is no other option. And so when we're faced with events like that, we have technology that can help us to take in thousands and thousands of different pieces of data that are happening and changing real time, and to give our operators the ability to start being much more predictive about the decisions they're making, so they can actually see a decision I'm making now will create this problem tomorrow, and then make a different decision. So that's allowed us to help improve on-time performance in the customer.
So you've seen that improvement.
We have.
That's verifiable.
Yeah.
How much do you have to work, though, with, for example, the airport itself, and obviously the regulators and things like that? I mean, because like as you said, a lot of this is out of your control.
It is.
Yeah.
Look, yes, we have a lot of different entities we have to work with, whether it's airport authorities, government authorities, regulators, other airlines, partners, all of them. And yeah, I mean, we work together as collaboratively as possible. And even with other airlines, we fight fiercely and competitively every day, but we also do belong to a broader industry that is trying to generally get customers where they're going on time.
I'm curious, and this is all for all of you, as you're rolling out these tools internally, externally, I mean, what has been sort of the response that you've gotten? I mean, there are a lot of people that have been distrustful of some of this technology, whether it's internally, it's going to take my job, and even externally. If you're going to a customer, for example, Brian, there's a trust factor. How do I know that you really are picking out the best scent for me, or not just driving me to, I don't know, say the most expensive cologne or whatever?
Well, I think it depends. I mean, on some of the things that we do, I think it's very interactive. So it's more of an experience than thinking about the trust factor. I think we see the trust because when people buy the product, they like it. And really, a satisfied customer is really what's important to us. And then really kind of training models so they get better and better, over time. And I think you just improve that experience. You improve the level that you can target what somebody really wants, and you learn from all the different people around the world that are using it. So, we have a great audience of, people that follow and love our brands. So that's how, really kind of taking that data. But I would say in general, the trust factor, comes when you're trying to drive efficiency with AI and start using agentic strategies for workflow. And, people more immediately think about, well, we're trying to take my job away. And so I think kind of really showing people that we're trying to increase throughput, and we're trying to increase quality and move people to roles that are really more value add to the organization, and take away the things that in a lot of cases people really disliked. And employees, to what Laksh was saying, the whole idea that it's really complicated to deal with a lot of different systems and technologies just to do the basic things like, I want to see my paycheck, I need to change something. You can really make that easy. So the cultural aspect, I think, is even bigger. The trust, how you treat people's data, you have to earn that over time.
Is it easier to do this with, I guess, your established customers, meaning the people that have already been repeats, or the new people that you're bringing in, maybe someone who hasn't actually touched a product?
Yeah, I think it's both sides of it, because as you think about social media and influencers and how we kind of utilize and understand what's really trending and what people really want, making sure we can connect that to either the products that we have, or because it's a new product we launched, how we can bring that with the education piece to consumers. I think that interplay is where you build trust, and doing it from the company that manufactures the product that people know around the world. I mean, people know Estée Lauder almost everywhere in the world. We're everywhere in every country. And so, different than new brands, maybe you didn't hear of one, I think you have to build trust over time, and that takes, a lot of brand building and brand equity.
Are you using this at all, Laksh, for content creation at all, or even just tracking maybe what your viewers want to see, or maybe they don't want to see?
You know, in the media space, AI is a very tricky area. So we had to kind of parse it in a couple different angles. Like the stuff I was talking about earlier was definitely the enterprise productivity. As a company, we totally embraced it. It's kind of siloed off from like what you call the content piece of it. Content piece can be broken up into like two areas. One is like the actual creation of content, which is definitely a very, I'm going to call it a touchy subject in the sense of between all of the unions and regulations associated to it. But around the actual content creation, there's a lot of work that happens in a studio that you would think about, like the marketing creation, the actual supply chain. So there's a whole art we call the media supply chain, where literally when a production creates content and we need to get it out to Paramount Plus, Pluto, which is our free-to-air, and even to our broadcast, there's a whole set of, I'm going to call it QC and regulatory type of things that we need to look at to fit that. And you can imagine, think of it this way, before AI and before machine learning, someone's watching this. You watch an episode of Yellowstone, you gotta watch the whole thing, make sure everything, the editing, all the commercial breaks, everything is there. So everything we're doing now is, I would say, in support of the content and leveraging things like AI, and a lot of the hyperscaler providers are actually investing in this type of area. So being able to implement those type of solutions before and after content's created, and even like with the marketing pieces of it, is a huge win for us in that respect. But we're very careful about the actual content creation, because that, for given reasons, there's lots of, I'll say pitfalls in trying to touch with that.
You're nodding your head there.
Yeah. Really similar where I am in marketing and how we create content and use it and transcreate from there.
Mm-hmm. There's a power to all this too. There's also a cost, and I am curious as to how you're sort of measuring the potential return. I know there's been a lot of talk about ROI, but when you talk to a lot of companies, they say, look, you have to kind of look at it a little bit deeper than that. It's not necessarily just about what shows up on the balance sheets, that there is sort of a dividend that somehow gets paid back in other ways. I mean, for example, Carol, you're kind of talking about the idea of on time and reducing some of the, I guess, the friction with customers that I would think would maybe engender longer term more loyalty to the airline.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, the way we think about it is in a couple of fronts. There are, in the use of any technology that we employ, there are certainly areas where there is a hard cost savings. It's really easy to quantify, but there are also a lot of areas where the value of a better decision or the ability to have a better prediction, or the ability to get to things that we're not getting to today, the ability to provide customers more choice, all of those types of things are things that are a bit harder to quantify, but they show up especially in things like Net Promoter Score, which you can kind of translate into real ROI. And so a lot of times, a lot of the ROI benefits that we measure are maybe second and third order, but they're still very real and very measurable.
I am curious though too. I mean, you came from the world of banking. I know you started out, Carol, in airlines, but you spent a lot of time at Pizza Hut as well. And I am curious as to whether there are any parallels between sort of maybe what you were doing in the restaurant space and what you're doing today now back at JetBlue.
So fun fact, that was the question Robin Hayes, our former CEO, asked me in my first interview at JetBlue. He said, what on earth did you learn in pizza that you think could be helpful in an airline? So I'll give, I think, a similar answer because I guess it worked out. Look, I think pizza is actually a lot more complex than you think. It is nowhere near as complex as an airline, but it is actually a lot more complex than you think. And a delivery fleet is in some ways not that different from, a fleet of delivery drivers and delivery vehicles is in some ways not that different from an airline purchase. For an airline fleet. I think the big differences between the two, pizza is an immediate, instant gratification purchase. I'm hungry now, my family's hungry now, I want food now, and if there is any friction in the process, I will just go to a competitor. Whereas airline choices are a little bit more thoughtful, obviously a higher price point, and a longer transaction with the customer. But that sort of appetite for, or lack of appetite for friction, I think is one of the things that I became passionate about and have tried to translate to JetBlue. So.
Okay, I see where Robin gave you the job. But, but on that point of friction too, can we go to like sort of the end of that process? So whether, when you're actually buying the ticket, I know you have, tried some different payment models with Venmo, but I am curious also on the retail side with Estee Lauder, the idea of making sure that as somebody goes through that process, and I know particularly with e-commerce, we've seen this a lot, people abandon those carts when they get to the end for a wide variety of reasons. So how do you sort of get that across the finish line?
Yeah, so I mean, for us, I've been there less than a year, and sort of the first thing that we're doing is we're modernizing the whole consumer experience, but in a unified commerce approach, so that we understand whoever the consumer is in a store or online or wherever you may be, that we understand what you bought, what you liked, what you didn't buy. And so I think the idea that you can really quickly understand data and connect it to people, what they like, personalize it in trends, like that really transcends everything. And that's how like the real ROI for us is, are we selling more and are we selling more profitably? So we can measure both factors when, if you go through, we know that somebody abandoned a cart, and then we could actually retarget them. We can actually then personalize maybe a promotion or a discount or something else, and we can learn exactly why we think they abandoned the cart. And the data, the large language models have never been so important, and very, very similar, whether it's in banking or I was in Pepsi before, so I was in a lot of different places, and the idea of data as an asset has never been more critical, and that relates directly to how you can serve customers, how you understand them, and how you drive your top and bottom line.
And for Paramount, I mean, that has to be really valuable. I mean, obviously having the streaming service compared to sort of the old way of tracking, eyeballs on TV through Nielsen boxes or at the movie theater through box office receipts, I assume the data you're getting from streaming has to be pretty invaluable.
Oh yeah, it's not even just the streaming and the linear ad sales research and information that we get. The other factor is just where's our content? Like for us, like we have content, I should know the amount of years that we've been out, but we have content back from the 60s and 50s that, we have a treasure trove there. And being able to not just look at the research, but also look at what content is available to us, and as things come up, and being able to pull from that archive in a, much more in less manual ways is a huge piece for us.
Is that like you toggle it based on what seasonality? We get our Christmas movies around.
It's either that, or even when a breaking news happens, we can go back to 60 Minutes and pull archives from the 70s that might relate to, if someone passes away. That's, being able to do a lot of that like research, and then being able to correlate that information so we could use it for new content.
Yeah.
I mean, especially as a franchise business, being able to like take Star Trek and being able to constantly use the previous like the footage and information that helps us create new content. It's just, that's a very powerful thing for us.
Yeah, because in the old days, it was basically some guy in a basement who had to go through, actual physical tapes to find.
It literally was, and we still are, having big machines that can literally take those things and digitize it. So that's. But once you have it digitized, even just doing the vector embeddings into those things and being able to easily search across the board is a huge win for both the streaming and even just deciding what we're going to create in the future. Yeah. Because the other part of it is actually the rights associated to all this content too. Yeah, the licensing and rights, and then tying that together. You can imagine like in a media space being able to, the data science side of it is very extensive in this, because being able to pull all that together and be basically even saying, can we distribute this content in England or the US it's an art with some of these contracts that have lasted for years.
Carol, I'm curious as to how you would use that. Kind of in the same vein, but more on the dynamic pricing. Obviously, airline prices adjust based on demand, based on weather, availability of planes, et cetera.
Yeah, we're not really using AI in that way. I mean, we have always, and most airlines have always looked at demand-based pricing, and so we continue to do that in the same way that we always have. But we do look at ways that we can offer customers a more personalized experience overall through their shopping on our digital channels and even in the airport.
shopping for Estée Lauder products.
Maybe, I don't know.
I hope so.
Yeah, we can see.
Absolutely.
But you also introduced, there's some new features to be able to track your bags electronically.
We
So
did.
you know that it's on the plane, I guess.
Yeah, so pointing back to that friction point that I started with, we recently introduced the ability to track your bag, also the ability, if you have an air tag in your bag, to share it with us, so that if something were to happen, which is rare, but occasionally it does happen, then it helps us to retrieve that bag and find the bag sooner. And then, we've been very focused also on frictionless payment capabilities as well. So, yeah.
Yeah. And Brian, I am curious on that front. I mean, I know that in the retail space, I know dynamic pricing is kind of a dirty phrase that nobody wants to talk about. But has there ever been discussions about that? I mean, a little bit more of I guess meeting, even if it's not necessarily changing the price, but maybe adding things on or subtracting things off.
No, it's one of the capabilities that I'm specifically building because I own data as part of my role. And understanding how we can deliver on dynamic pricing is really important because, price isn't just like what you see on there. It's, well, is there a promotion? Is there a discount you're offering? And how do you really personalize because you want to acquire or maintain a customer? Those are really important elements of it. And, places like Amazon and, other kind of pure plays, they've been doing that for a long time. So I think, how do you see all the places that somebody can buy your product? And how do you understand what the net price is? And then how do you really kind of almost do root canal on exactly what's happening in the marketplace, so you can, still maintain the margin, the pricing that you need as a company, but you can tailor it to what a specific person in geography, or are they in an airport, or whatever they may be, so that you really can offer them what you think they will want, so they buy your product. And you have to understand the competitors, because understanding what competitive products are doing is equally as important in trying to make sure that you're in the right price point.
All right, this is an illuminating conversation. We can continue on, but we are out of time. Our thanks to all three of you, Carol, Brian, and Laksh.